All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cliff's Notes. You're about to meet one of the top estate planning attorneys in the state of Texas. Make sure you have your pencil ready and an 8.5 by 11 notebook style page to write on, because you're going to need it. You're going to meet Scott Anderson right after this. Real estate agents, are you struggling with the day-to-day grind, dialing for dollars, putting in hours of floor time with little to show for it? Are you looking for tips, tricks, and tactics to accelerate your career as an agent that will have you closing more homes, working with more clients, and earning more money than ever before? Hi, my name's Cliff Freeman, and I've spent the past 2 decades of my real estate career running one of the top brokerages in DFW and personally coaching over 1,000 high-performing real estate professionals across North America. I created this podcast to share the strategies and tactics you need to explode your real estate business. I guarantee it. Oh, man, it is great to be back. You know, C3, I was on an airplane after we landed for 2 hours last night. Back from Scottsdale.
Real estate agents, are you struggling with
going back there? Rewind it. I like that. I like that intro. But I got to tell you what, now I know why the DOT passed that passenger rights law, that you can't be on those cigar tubes in them for longer than 3 hours before. I mean, you go crazy in those things.
I start sweating and getting claustrophobic.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but.
Well, I do. And for the first time ever, I saw a service dog that would have taken up an entire aisle. What was the dog, that big white dog?
Great Pyrenees?
Great Pyrenees.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that in a coach section of a Airbus 321?
No.
It was unbelievable.
That's a tight squeeze.
Yeah, it was a tight squeeze, is right. Yeah.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be back.
Glad you made it back.
And I am super excited to have Scott with us today. Scott, welcome to Cliff's Notes.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. This is a little different path we're going down today. Normally, we have people who are directly involved in the real estate business. I know you are, as probably an investor in some ways, but what your mission is to help people protect their assets and also from a lot of things, not just from other people, but from those dreaded taxes, estate taxes, and death taxes, and all those kinds of things. And you've done some work with my family, and that's why I wanted to get you on the show, is because I never realized what I had kind of open. And these days, you think about just the possibilities of people stealing your personal information, your credit scores, and all that kind of stuff, getting into your credit. But as a real estate agent, when we get into this business, we're not focused on protecting our business and doing that kind of thing. All we're focused on is how do we get the next check. Right? So there are many watching the show today who have a successful real estate business. And I would imagine, just like me, you probably haven't taken a look at yourself and your business and done everything that you can do to protect it from people that, it's like you get a target on your back, Scott, when you start making money. So let's dive in a little bit. First of all, C3, you met Scott, and you clicked right away because of the word "the." Now let's talk about that for a minute.
Well, you might have me making enemies right off the bat.
Well, I don't know. Are there any Michigan or University or Michigan State fans out there? That's a big rivalry, isn't it?
Yeah, University of Michigan.
University of Michigan.
We usually don't say the word.
Gotcha. Okay, it's out of the vocabulary. But you were making an interesting remark just before the show, Scott, and pointed out that the Ohio State University had actually trademarked the word "the." How in the heck does that happen?
Well, I'm not an expert in trademark law, but I did follow the progress where they got turned away once or twice. There was this concept that this is just an article in the English language, right? But they pushed back and eventually were successful. And I was quite surprised because I didn't think that would be the outcome. But it's an interesting concept to trademark the word "the." And as I was saying to C3, you see hats now or shirts that just have the word "the" on them. And if you're in the know, then you understand what that is.
Well, yeah, and for those of you who know Al Stasic and Ryan Reilly and some of our friends up in Ohio, it's a religion up there. Ohio State football, it's incredible. So that's where you actually did your undergrad
And law school.
and law school.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
I ran from home first.
Ran from
I
home.
ran from home, and I ran from Ohio State first because all of my friends out of high school, most of them anyway, were going there. I didn't want to have any part of that.
You had enough of them in high school, huh?
Yeah, well, I wasn't the best student either to start with, and so you don't really want to spend a lot of time and money going down a path you're probably not going to be successful at, and you know that ahead of time.
Yeah. Now, you grew up in that area.
Yes, as I was mentioning earlier, I grew up about 5 miles from the stadium, and Saturday mornings, afternoons, evenings, whenever the game time was, just pandemonium in the whole town. The actual town that I grew up in is called Upper Arlington, and it is right off of Lane Avenue, the main thoroughfare, going east and west down into the campus.
Oh wow, that's close to that's very close.
Yeah.
Well, they say proximity is everything. Did you become a fan at a very young age?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I did. I think when you grow up in an area like that, you tend to become that fan. I'm sure there are some people that went other directions because they just got tired of it, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
Every Saturday morning, people in Class A RVs, $300,000, $400,000 RVs rolling down the road, get up playing the fight song, right? It was almost like a religion in the mornings.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, currently, you're one of the most prominent estate planning attorneys in Texas, probably in the country. Tell us about that path. How did you get from growing up in Columbus, Ohio, to now moving to North Texas? And along the way, you had some interesting stops as well, where you had part of a career in the service with the Marines.
Well, that was really the next step, realizing that what I lacked was maturity and discipline and drive. I looked around and thought, how can I get that? And the Marine Corps became the answer to that.
Was that a self-diagnosis, or did
Yes.
you?
It was pretty obvious coming out of high school that I just was not a good student. I would get comments on my grade cards all the time. Bright guy, if he would just do his work or stop talking or
Right.
whatever. And
Right.
so I needed to find a space where they would instill in me some discipline and some maturity. And it's pretty hard to beat the Marine Corps for that.
You know, it is, and I hate to, this is just so coincidence. For the last about dozen shows, we've talked about how having a background in the military really prepares you well for business. In fact, Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was interviewed one time, and the interviewer asked Mr. Kiyosaki, what career path would you recommend for somebody who wanted to become an entrepreneur? Okay. And the first thing out of his mouth was the military, because you have to know leadership, right?
Yes.
You have to have the discipline, you have to have the grit, the determination. Living an entrepreneurial life is much different than growing up, say, in a corporate environment where you're told where to be, when to be. When you have your own business, just as you do, and the people you work with, many of them are self-employed, but it takes that skill set, and boy, if you can't learn it there, I guess you're not going to learn it, huh?
No, that's true. I mean, you're going to be given the basic training and the knowledge to start at the bottom where you're told everything to do, but as you watch your leaders, you learn how to lead. And then as you rise in the ranks, you are given more and more responsibility to lead others. I also think that it's not like every leader in the service is a good leader. We're a cross-section of humanity. So I've run into some bad bosses in the past and have vowed never to be like that. I think you can learn just as much from a bad leader experience as a good leader experience.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, they say that you learn more through failure than you do through success, right?
I think there's truth in that.
Yeah. Well, tell us how all of this experience prepared you for what you do now.
Well, it's interesting because going from a decidedly C student in high school, I mean, barely squeaking by, to coming back to Ohio State. Now, a little bit of the backstory there, because I said I ran from there. I started applying to other schools, and with my background in the military and some of the other things I'd done, I had a pretty good acceptance rate. I was accepted at Pepperdine, I was accepted at Notre Dame, and I started looking at the cost.
That's so sweet.
And I realized,
You're not
well, you know
kidding.
what?
Yeah.
As a resident of Ohio going to the Ohio State University, so this is where I start to feel a little older, because I tell the younger attorneys with whom I work, my entire undergraduate and law school education total $22,000.
Oh my gosh.
And so
wow.
the cost at Ohio State was so much lower than these other schools. It just drove me there because I had to pay my own way through.
Right.
And so once I got there, it was really evident that my choice to go into the service was paying huge dividends. I was on a mission. I just kind of tore it up and had a drive to go to law school at that point. And that's what I did again at both of those degrees at Ohio State.
So was there a VA benefit that helped your school as well? or-
Back in the day, we had what was called VEAP. That's an acronym for Veterans Educational Assistance Program. It isn't anywhere near like a VA or a GI Bill. Basically, I could put in $1, they would match with $2,
Okay.
but the combined cap was $8,100. It wasn't
Wow.
a lot of money.
Wow.
So it
And-
basically paid my rent for the 9 months that I was in law school, all 3 of those years, and then I worked during the summers.
Yeah. So it is possible to get through college without student loans, right? Isn't
It's
it?
true.
I mean, you can do it. It's just, you just may have to get a side hustle or whatever.
Well, undergrad, I worked 55 hours a week and went through undergrad in 3 years. So it was, I really had no social life at the time.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of outside interest. But again, I really was on a mission, number one, to prove to myself, and number two, to prove to the people that were going to be on the admissions board that I had something to offer
Yeah.
and could be a good asset coming out of the law school.
I get that. One day we'll do a story about my experience with college, and I think we have some similar paths we've taken. But
Okay.
you know, it is that it really the enemy is the inner me in many cases, and you know, we've got kids now who wouldn't want to work a minute while they're in college because they're afraid they're going to miss the experience, right?
Yeah.
Or you know, they don't have a concept of it. You know, it's right now it's buy now, pay later. They're in that sort of instant gratification part of life that you've got to stay away from when you're young, so that you can live like none of your friends will when you get older, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to put a plug in too for what is called the Hazelwood Act here in Texas. I find that most parents don't know about this. It is a program where if you enter the service as a resident of Texas and you do 90 days active duty, it doesn't have to be consecutive, just 90 days minimum, the United States government will pay for 5 years, or basically the schools comp 5 years. The state schools in Texas will comp 5 years of education at any level, all the way up to medical school. And I think it's a great program. I think very few people know about it. My son is a direct beneficiary of that. So he has gotten out of the Air Force and is getting ready to start law school at Tech. And he has all of his law school paid for. So it's a great program, and I think parents and students just don't know about it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. You thought you were just going to hear about like corporations and all that kind of stuff, didn't you? You know, so you never know what kind of value you're going to get on this show. By the way, congratulations, Tech, great law school. My uncle and cousin both taught law school there. They both were DAs in Lubbock. Both were federal judges. One, my cousin, still is. So
Okay.
they got a great legal.
It is a
program
great
out
law
there.
school. I've worked with several attorneys out of there over the years, and they've all been top notch.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Congratulations. All right. So let's talk a minute, if we could. And by the way, we can do this in English or Russian because Scott is
My Russian is a little rusty.
a little rusty.
Yes.
But all right, let's do a little sidebar real quick. Tell us how you learned Russian and why.
Oh, interesting story. So I was at the recruiter's office needing to go, and every program that I picked, there was a 6 to 9 month waiting list. And so I thought foolishly, accepted the concept of go in open contract. And he was telling me that something with my scores would come available in the 13 weeks that I was in boot camp. And that did happen. So I got pushed into this program. Basically, I was asked at boot camp last week, how would you like to go to Monterey, California for a year and learn how to speak Mandarin Chinese? That was the first thought.
Okay.
And I asked a few questions and realized that it was probably better than rolling around in the mud with a rifle for the next 6 years. I'm not slighting those folks. That's the backbone of the Marine Corps. But for me, I kind of liked that intellectual path, and so I wanted to go down that route. Turns out that when I showed up at what is called the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, a guy who became a really good friend of mine, Andy Burris, they pushed him into the last Mandarin Chinese slot, and that then segued me over into Russian. So life is somewhat serendipitous, right, in that direction. And so 6 hours of class a day, probably 3 to 4 to 5 hours of homework a night, depending on the module we were working on, exams every week. And we were taught by native Soviets who had, the Soviet Union existed at that time, right? Now it's Russia and it's conglomerate, but the Soviet Union at that time existed. And so we were taught by native Soviets who had defected and were working for the American government. And it was total immersion, which you'll hear people say that it's the best way to learn. It really is. Mm-hmm. And so there was a time where I was very fluent in Russian. I just don't have a cause to use it around here in Dallas. And so I would probably have to get put back into a situation where I was inserted in a sense and immersed again. And I think it would come back pretty quickly, but I'm very rusty.
Yeah. It's not like, I mean, it's such a different language. It's incredible. It's probably as difficult, except maybe the alphabet's different, everything. Mandarin Chinese might have been a little more challenging, but
I would imagine
not very much more. Anyway, you picked the hard stuff. You were not afraid to roll your sleeves up and tackle whatever came your way.
No, it was a great opportunity, and it afforded me the chance to travel the world. Basically, what I was tasked with doing was mimicking or mirroring the Soviet forces. That could be at sea, it could be on land, it could be in the air with the job that we did. I spent 2 tours out at sea with the Navy at 6 months apiece and saw the world that way. Spent time in a lot of various countries. But the interesting thing was I was never attached to a Marine Corps unit. I was inserted as an individual into an Air Force or an Army unit, and half the time they didn't know what to do with me. I showed up for work, but then if I was training and on base somewhere, my time off, I never did any duty, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But then I would be sent out to do the job, and it was like the Lone Ranger. I mean, I really had no support network and really just me doing my job. But It's pretty heady stuff to be 21 years old and be on a cruiser out in the middle of the Indian Ocean and realize you can pick up the phone and call the admiral of the fleet at any time if you're hearing something that threatens the fleet.
Yeah. See, this is the guy I want on my team, watching after my stuff, right? You with me? This kind of background. So let's talk about estate planning.
Sure.
When you went to law school, did you know then you were going to specialize in estate planning?
No, I actually thought I was going to be a litigator.
Okay.
So my last couple years in the Marine Corps, LA Law hit the air, and I thought, that looks so cool. You know, of course, it's television, right? But I got out of law school. I did litigation for the first couple years, and I couple 2 comments all the time. The first is, I was really good. And the second is, I hated every minute of it.
Oh my God.
And so what do you do with that, right? I would come home at night, and I'm trying to play with my 1-year-old child, and I can't leave it at the office. I'm thinking about what I got to do tomorrow to respond to what was served on my client today. And I also did a gut check in the mirror at some point, and no disrespect to my litigation colleagues, there is a place for it. There really is. I think a lot of it gets abused, but I personally felt like looking in the mirror, my job was to do 2 things. Number 1, destroy the person on the other side. And number 2, argue all day long, on the phone, by letter, in front of a judge or jury. And it just wasn't good for my soul. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I looked around and said, all right, you still got a law license. What else have you been exposed to that you think would be more constructive instead of destructive? Mm-hmm. And had a child with special needs at the time. My oldest son, Mitchell, is almost 30 now, was born with cerebral palsy. He does great, but when you get that diagnosis, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of searching for resources, which nobody was there to help us with. It just didn't exist. The network didn't exist. And so I thought, this might be a place where I could go where I could help people who are fearful like I am, but have now navigated those waters. I can be that person to show them the path. And so that's what I did. I've gone into estate planning to help people. I know that sounds so cliche, but it's super rewarding, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is. And if you enjoy what you're doing, it's really not work.
It's true.
And, you know, I just want to leave this place a better place than, you know, when I got here. That's my thing right now. But helping people, I mean, you can do quite well yourself. In fact, I always tell people in real estate, your bank account is just a measure of how well you're helping other people. And speaking of which, you have a very unique model at your firm. And a lot of, you know, you go to some of the big firms, they'll put you with the $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour, whatever attorney, and they'll rack up a big bill, and they'll just keep, you know, writing documents every time you need something done. A phone call that was $150, or, you know, there was a letter I had to send out that was $300, and we need to amend your trust. Okay, that'll be $1,500 when I can get to it. That kind of thing. That's the typical. By the way, you haven't had to worry about this yet.
No, not yet. I'm kind of like a fly on the wall back here.
Yeah, but this is good for you. Okay.
You know, I might have to ask him what the definition of real estate planning is.
Right. Sure. Yeah, we can dive into that too. But, you know, the reality is that, and that's why when I was introduced to you by Miles Harris and Chuck, you know, I thought that what you did was really fair, and you know, you were willing to, you know, kind of meet people at their point of need, as opposed to, you know, try to extract as much money from them as possible. And I think, listen, you earn, you know, well, the first day I met you, I thought, I got to pay this guy more than he's asking me to pay. And,
I do okay.
Yeah, but serious, because I'd been with some other people, and it was like, wow. But the work that you do and the way you do it and the way that you put customer service level at the top, instead of, it's not about production, how many documents we can write. It's more about, you know, I mean, I really felt like you were looking at me personally saying, you know, like, hey, I know what you're going through. I know where you know, what you need to do. Let's do this. You know, we're not going to charge you every time you need a question answered or something like that. How did you arrive at that as a way to do business, as opposed to the way that some of the more traditional firms do it?
Well, there might be three parts that I'd answer. The first part's pretty short, which is, we have a mantra in the office, and we really try to live by it. Here it is. Be a person first, be an attorney second. Because I don't care how gifted or technically savvy you are in the law, if people can't make a connection with you, then they don't want to do business with you. Okay, so that's the first thing that we try to teach the younger attorneys coming into the firm. The second thing would be, how do we want to do business in a way that sets us apart from our competitors? And you went to one of the big things, which is, we hear story after story about people being nickel and dimed to death. A lot of people have had that experience with an attorney where they're being charged for every copy, every bit of postage, and so on. And so we wanted to make ourselves different and just said everything that we do is going to be flat fee, and it's going to be turnkey. And I've done thousands of estate plans over the years. When I visit with you and I know the scope of the work now that we need to go for, I can just say, here's the fee, right? And it doesn't matter how many meetings or phone calls or emails it takes to get it done. It's just going to get done for that fee. And we have absolutely found that people love the predictability of that. They love the transparency of it. And it's not an open-ended, unpredictable hourly billing process.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. It is so uncommon. I literally was just, I was shocked and pleasantly surprised. But just, it's the culture too of your office. You don't walk in there and feel like you need to keep your hand, and when I go to your office, keep my hand on my wallet.
That's good.
So
I'm glad it feels that way.
Right. And, but that's the beauty about this. And I think just that preconception that a lot of people probably watching this show have is that, it's just going to be prohibitive. They're going to, it's not going to be a pleasant experience and so forth. And literally, Scott, everything that we've done has just been, it's been super, it's like a done for you type process, if you know what I'm saying. And it's been great. When you look for tell me what your perfect client is. Do you guys have an avatar for a perfect client?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think what most people would perceive the response is going to be is it's a dollar value. It's a net worth. That doesn't play into it, at least at the first layer. I want someone who's coachable. I want someone I like. I mean, if I'm going to do business with you over the next 20 years, I want to like you, and I want you to like me. Not that I want to, be a bootlick, right? But I'm just saying we have to have a connection as people. I think there are too many law firms that if you can pull out your checkbook and write a check, they'll just take you as a client. We call that practicing threshold law. Again, this is another difference between us and other estate planning firms out there. For example, we charge a consultation fee. Nobody else that I know charges a consultation fee. And I'll get that question sometimes from a referral source or from a prospective client. And I don't want to sound pompous when I say this, but my response is, yeah, we're that strong. We can do that. And it helps weed out some of the people who might be undesirable. There are just people out there that want to milk you for information, and they just really don't have an intention of doing anything. So we tend to talk in terms of, we like A clients, we're good with B clients, we don't want any C and D clients. And that comes down to personality and coachability. If I'm going to fire a client ever, or not take someone on as a client, it's really because of who they are, not what they have.
That's good, because I was really concerned about getting fired.
Right.
We're still working on some stuff, but he's been very patient. He's got a great bedside manner for sure. But the appeal to that is, and again, just because having been in the real estate business as long as I have, coached and trained as many real estate agents, this conversation rarely happens. It certainly doesn't happen enough about this estate planning process and protection. But let's go in, if you don't mind, let's go into some of the basics, the nuts and bolts about somebody who gets into the real estate business as an independent contractor, a sole proprietor. What are some of the things they need to consider, from the get-go? Because they don't have a 401k, they don't have any,
Right.
they're just self-employed out there on their own.
So it probably takes two paths, right? There's the realtor, who may or may not invest in real estate themselves, and then there's the real estate investor. And I think they have some different tools at their disposal.
Yep.
I'm going to start with some basics just for every individual.
Okay.
And so I think we start from the perspective of 70% of the people in this country pass away having done no estate planning. It's a shocking figure, but it's true, and it's been that figure pretty much my entire career. So how do we break that cycle? Well, I think education is the key, right? What is it about estate planning that is necessary for people? We can start from the perspective of a newly married couple who just had their first child. Shouldn't they at least have a basic will to designate a guardian for that child if they pass away? And the answer is clearly yes, but most people don't do that. Then we get into other aspects of it, like powers of attorney, medical power of attorney, financial and legal power of attorney, things like that. Take a little bit deeper dive and start to ask questions like, do you have a desire to avoid probate? Now, this comes right back to the real estate issue, because the misconception in our society is, if I own property, co-own property, usually husband and wife, but not always. If I co-own a house, let's say, a homestead, and my spouse passes, then I automatically own 100% of the house. And in the vast majority of states, that's not true. In Texas, it is not true. So what happens is there's a shock to the system, because someone loses a spouse, they're already in a bad place because they're grieving. And somewhere along the line, and a lot of times I think it comes out when they want to sell the house, and the realtor gets involved and the title company gets involved, and they find out, now wait a minute, what's really happening here is I, the surviving spouse, still own the half of the house that I always had, but I don't own the half of the house that my spouse had. And the only way to get that half of the house over to me is to go through the probate process, go in front of a judge, have a probate hearing, and get appointed as an executor. Myth number 2, if you're looking at a will and it says, my wife's name is Chris. If I had a will and said, I hereby appoint Chris as my executor, my will does not appoint anyone. But that's a misconception. People look at that and say, I already have an executor. No, that is an expression of your desire, who you want to be your executor. But my wife, Chris, if all I had was a will, it would have to step in front of the judge. Is she capable and willing? Lots of people get disqualified. If you have Alzheimer's, you're not going to be an executor, right? If you are living overseas, you might decline to be the executor. So the judge wants to see capable and willing, and then that person gets appointed as an executor. So if we want to avoid that trap, oh, and by the way, I just met with a client yesterday, property in 4 states. So they've got property here in Oklahoma, Florida, and Colorado. It's a couple. That's 8 probates at the end of the day.
Wow.
So how do we avoid probate becomes the next dive, which is going the trust direction. And the misconception there is, well, Scott, why are you talking about a trust? I'm not a Rockefeller. I'm not a Kennedy. It's more about control. It's about whether you want a court-based plan or a family-based plan. And if you want to take control away from the courts, we use trust, especially with real estate. Especially. You can do a lot of other things with accounts, with beneficiary designations and things like that. But for the real estate folks out there, the trust is the way to avoid probate anytime there are multiple owners to a piece of property.
Interesting. So, I'm sitting here next to my son, and you said there were 70% of people who pass away or retire. I forget what it was, but they haven't done an estate plan.
Right.
He's just turned 28. He's invincible. He's never going to die.
Sure.
At what age should people start looking at this stuff?
Well, every single one of my children, and I have 6, when they left the house at 18, and they are adults, right, in the eyes of the law. Again, another thing out there that people don't think about. If my wife and I want to continue to be mom and dad to help with medical decisions. So if my son Stuart, who's 26, is in an automobile accident, God forbid, and he's in the hospital in Lubbock and he's unconscious, I show up and I want to make decisions. I don't have his medical power of attorney. The doctor really should not release medical records to me or give me any medical information.
Right.
So we start to coach parents that at 18, or even at your age, if you want him or someone else to be able to help you in times of crisis and make medical, financial, and legal decisions when you can't, then that's where powers of attorney and basic wills come in. And so at 18, it's a good thought to have to at least have powers of attorney. A will would not hurt.
I bet there's some people that are in deep thought right now out on the call.
Every person who has a kid at college right now,
Yeah.
they have an adult in their family. They don't see them that way because it's their child, but it's an adult. And the law says as an adult, their records are still subject to the same privacy laws, same
Yes.
HIPAA laws as you and I, right? So 18 is the age. Whether they are truly adults or not, 18 is the age at which parents can get shut out, but we can get around that by having those 18-year-old children execute the documents that allow mom and dad to continue to be mom and dad for a while.
Right. They say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. With estate planning, I guess that applies too for most people. So let's say that I'm knee deep in my career. I'm in my 50s or 60s, and I've been in real estate 20, 30 years, and I really, maybe I got a LLC set up for my business. Is it ever too late to seek the help of someone that does what you do?
Not until you pass away.
Not until you pass away.
We finalized a plan last week for a man. We weren't sure when he was going to pass. We knew it was imminent. It was literally his last day on the earth, and we finalized the plan by going to the hospital. And he passed that night, but he got it done.
Wow. That's pretty incredible.
But you don't want to be in that
You
situation.
don't want to be that guy, right?
I
yeah.
don't enjoy
that's-
doing that.
Yeah.
I enjoy the end product where we have helped, but I don't like being in that situation when it could have been done. He was in his 80s.
Yeah.
He had decades
Yeah.
to do this.
You don't always get that opportunity either.
That's correct.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah.
That's where we have the term intestate, right? We
Right.
die without anything. So here's another big point. For those of you who have blended families, if you don't at least have a basic will that gives everything to the other spouse or whoever you want it to go to, then what you find out after your spouse dies is your stepchildren have a claim on your house. So there's another real estate point. They also have a claim on some of your other assets. It's so easy to have a 6 to 8 page basic will to circumvent the issues that blended families could have, and that's a good starting point.
Yeah. So without getting into the nitty gritty, dirty detail, is it possible to protect estates from creditors at all, or?
Yes, but there's a caveat to that answer. So if we have, I was talking about trusts earlier, and I think people also have a misconception that trusts help protect assets. If it is an irrevocable trust, it would help protect assets.
Okay.
But we give up control, we give up ownership. That's not everybody's ideal thing. Typically, irrevocable trusts come into play when someone is either seeking or is already on some sort of needs-based government benefit. For example, a parent wants to leave an inheritance to benefit a child, but if they drop it directly on that child who has special needs and the child is on Medicaid and Medicare, it would destroy all of that. The child has to spend it all, and then they have to reapply to get on the benefits. But if we have a special needs trust, which is irrevocable, the child gets the best of both worlds. So irrevocable trusts can protect assets, but it's important to understand revocable trusts do not. So what do we do when we want to avoid probate with a revocable trust, but we still want to protect assets? And a little primer here. So 4 assets in our society are protected automatically by law. You don't have to lift a finger. Texas is not the same as every state when it comes to the homestead, but in Texas, your homestead cannot be taken from you because of a judgment or a creditor. Life insurance is protected, annuities are protected, and qualified retirement plans are protected. Everything else, if you didn't hear it in one of those 4 things, your checking account, your savings account, your investment account, your second, your third, fourth, fifth pieces of real estate, your mineral interests, on, is all on the chopping block if there's a creditor who gets a judgment against you. And so we then build other layers into a plan. We typically will go the route of a family limited partnership, and we can't get into the details of it today because it's about an hour-long discussion, but it basically says, okay, this is a different animal than an LLC or a corporation, and it's different in ways that creditors cannot attach it and take it, and they can't get inside of it to take the assets out.
Okay.
And then if you are strictly a real estate investor, you probably would have built into that family limited partnership what Texas allows. I think it's 9 states. I may be wrong on the number, but it's about 9 states now that have what are called series LLCs.
Yes.
And so they have some advantages to them that regular LLCs do not. You would probably bake those inside the family limited partnership for the real estate assets.
So this is pretty complicated stuff. A lot of people out there are thinking, well, I'll just go buy estate planning for dummies and I can figure it out. That's kind of like trying to do a LASIK surgery on yourself, isn't it? I mean,
Well, I like to think I know my limitations with what I know and don't know. And so, yeah, I'm not going to be doing my own LASIK surgery. I'm not going to be the architect of my own home. I could buy a blueprint off online, but then I still have to put it together. And my wife knows that I'm really, let me say it a different way. I can do anything from a set of plans really well the 3rd time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I tend to have to disassemble part of it and put it back together because I screwed something up.
Yeah.
So it sounds self-serving, and I don't want it to be. So it doesn't. I'm not saying us, right? I'm just saying, in general, it wouldn't hurt to go get a consultation. And if you don't want to pay, which again, we're the only ones around here that I know charge that, I'm telling you that almost every other estate planning attorney out there will give you a consultation at no charge, and you will leave there knowing what you want to do and why you want to do it, whether you work with that attorney or not. So that's a good starting point, is just to get the blueprint from the architect, so to speak, in the estate planning world.
Yeah. Who would mind paying for quality up front? I mean, I certainly wouldn't. I think that's a big problem real estate agents have, is they don't charge any money up front, most of them. we generally collect, not in all cases, but in many cases, we'll,
At closing.
we get paid at closing, but we also can get paid up, up front for certain expenses. But like you said, it just keeps the revolving door from doing that. It just you're going to get people who are serious, and if they've done their homework, many of them haven't done their homework on whom they want to do business with. And hopefully, part of this show, the reason is for you to get to know people, or for people to get to know you here a little bit, because I think it's super important. I can't tell you how many estate planning folks I have met and had to deal with, and it's kind of like finding a wife. You don't necessarily pick the first gal that says yes, right, or agrees to go out on a date with you. You have to you have to have certain standards and look for the right fit. So that's why I was excited to get you to come today.
I think that's right, and I'm going to make a bit of a joke here, but it also makes a point that I'm trying to get out to the world. So we've just rebranded. For years it's been Anderson Estate Planning, and what happens out in town is the younger attorneys go out and they're getting asked the question, well, where's Anderson? Who's Anderson? And so I have to kind of step out of the way. So we have, as of Tuesday, become First Estate Planning, 1ST, Estate Planning. And the reason I bring that up is to say, we will happily talk to anybody. We are going to charge a fee. We like to think that we are that strong. But there are people who don't want to pay that, and that's okay. But basically at our firm, you're going to get about an hour and a half of an attorney's time for that fee. And you're going to walk out of there with a blueprint of what you want to do, what you don't want to do. I have a feeling in most of those meetings, we clear up a lot of misconceptions that people walk in with about how things work. And so there's value to it. There's value to it.
What about the education piece with that? There's a consultation part of that, but you were talking about earlier,
Yes.
there's an education element that you're going to be pushing as far as, I don't know if it's an institute or something like that, where
The Estate Planning Institute. So this is a business that is separate from the firm. It's just getting off the ground. The web page is brand new. It's probably got about 2 pages to it. And it's a kind of wait and see thing, right? We want people to get the concept of what it is. But there's a good video that we've created on the website. And it's not when you say video, it's like, well, everybody has videos on their website. These are actually animated characters that we've created to be a little bit more benign, because how do you depict death without scaring people, right? That's a question. Or how do you show certain situations? And so there's about a minute and a half video online that is on the landing page of our website, and it has these animated characters that we've created, and we're getting ready to roll out hundreds of these videos. And that's the tip of the iceberg at the Estate Planning Institute, is to say, within the next 6 months or so, you'll have probably a dozen or 2 dozen videos if you're an estate planning attorney, or it's client facing too. So clients can go see these things before they come into the office. We would point them to that, and they pre-educate themselves. Basically, they know what they want before they go see an attorney. And we think that's invaluable, because again, if we can clear up the myths and misconceptions and give them knowledge that they don't already have, whether they work with us or somebody else, when they walk into that attorney's office, they're not going to be that person that says, I know what I want, and they're wrong. They're going to be that person that says, I know what I want, and they're right. They know exactly what they want because they've been educated.
That's a great idea, to be able to deliver. The more of your content they can consume before you meet with them, the better that's going to go.
And that consultation's smooth.
Because you don't have to educate them. You're actually just answering their questions and giving them guidance at that point.
Correct.
Scott, I can't believe that time has gotten away from us. I'm just looking at that. But I know there's some folks that are watching that would love to get a hold of you. What's the best way to reach out to your firm?
Sure. Our office number is 469-207-1529. And again, we are First Estate Planning. I will say my crew might still answer Anderson Estate Planning. They're still in transition, but that's how to get us.
Well, you heard it first from Anderson, First Estate Planning, right here. Now, do you handle clients outside of Texas?
We are licensed to handle folks in Colorado, Oklahoma, and we're working on Florida right now.
Okay, all right.
Amazing.
Great. So if you're in any of those states and and it would like to know more about what Scott can do for you, reach out to the firm and they'll get you set
Yeah,
up.
and I have a whole network of attorneys across the nation. If
Sure.
we're not there, I can recommend someone.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is where you want to start right here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Scott, thanks for being on
It's
the
been
show
a pleasure.
today.
I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's such a gap that needs to be filled, and I'm glad that we were able to get you to come on and help, and hopefully we'll be doing a great service to a lot of these folks that are watching
I
today.
hope so.
Yeah, super. Appreciate your
Thank
service.
you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
for-
you. Thank
I got way more out of it than I put into it. So
Well, terrific.
thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. C3, we're back at it again next week.
Man,
Yeah.
I learned a lot today. This is great.
This has blew your mind.
A lot of
It's like-
connecting of the dots. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Anyways.
yeah. You don't
Got a
even
lot
think
to
about
learn.
that stuff. I
Yeah, I
know,
want to get into
know.
financial literacy
Yeah.
myself. So.
Yep, I've
Yep.
got financial illiteracy is what I have. Legal illiteracy. That's why I have people like Scott on my team. That's what I'm
That's
telling
why
you,
we
man.
hire them. Yes.
Your
that's it.
network is your net worth, right? Your
That's
net
it.
worth is your net worth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to see you guys. Remember, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't need to be here. So we're going to send you much love from Lincoln Center here in Dallas, Texas, and thank you for being here today. We'll see you next week, again, right here on Cliff's Notes.
So tune in every Thursday where we'll give you the tips, tricks, and tactics to explode your business. I